Hello, well, this is my IOC on the Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. The section I've been given is the beginning of chapter 2 regarding the Valley of Ashes. The context of this passage, it's immediately after the first chapter where Nick introduces us to the world of the Buchanans and the opulence of their, um, their lifestyles and their material possessions. And this is set the Valley of Ashes is halfway between West Egg and New York. So Tom and Nick are traveling by train into the heart of the city from the location of West Egg, which is sort of East Egg, which is the symbolic of the old money of New York society at that time. West Egg being where Gatsby lives, symbolic of the new money. During this passage, as they wait at a railway siding, Nick is able to observe this bleak, apocalyptic wasteland. There are huge, the Valley of Ashes is a fantastic farm where ashes grow like wheat into ridges and hills, and there are grotesque gardens where ashes take the forms of houses and chimneys. It's the huge waste product of industrialization. So all of the processes of the economy that Tom Buchanan, Daisy, and Gatsby benefit from, we now see the underbelly, the underclass. This is very critical of capitalism and the greed and waste within society. It's also a crucial moment because it first introduces us to the Wilsons and the first reference to Tom Buchanan's mistress, Myrtle Wilson. It's a symbolic setting which foreshadows later events in the text where Gatsby's car, driven by Daisy, will kill Myrtle Wilson in the climatic ending of the novel. The main characters in this passage are Tom Buchanan. He is traveling with Nick, and I will talk about his characterization, his relationship with Nick. Nick, as the narrator, talk about his role and the cynicism and the sardonic tone of voice he adopts as he judges this apocalyptic scene, and to a certain extent discuss the character of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, who is actually a symbolic sign, a billboard sign for an optician's, who represents a symbolic role as his omniscient gaze stares out apathetically at this horrific scene. At the end of the passage, the two characters, Nick and Tom, walk into George B. Wilson's petrol station, and Tom begins a very arrogant and dismissive conversation where he fools and tricks George B. Wilson. He doesn't recognize his own humanity. He just wants to manipulate him because he would like to use Myrtle, as an object for his own sexual desires. So, beginning with the first major theme I'd like to look at is the apathy of the rich to the poor, and that's developed through Fitzgerald's use of the setting. The setting is the Valley of Ashes, this fantastic farm and the grotesque gardens. There's the use of alliteration here to show Nick's incredulous perspective on what he sees. The hyperbolic and ironic use of the fantastic farm. This is not fantastic at all, not in the way that the great Gatsby might be a conjurer and a magician. This is devastating to look at. There are, it's almost described like a horror novel, Supernatural, where on line 5, the line of grey cars comes along an invisible track, giving out a ghastly creak, and comes to rest. And immediately the ash-grey men swarm up with leaden spades and stir up an impenetrable cloud which screens their obscure operations from your sight. The use of sensory imagery there, and the fact that your sight is your sight is affected, means you can't see clearly and think clearly. And Nick, as the narrator, if we remember back to the beginning of chapter 1, he longs for the world to be in a sense of moral uniformity. He finds the events that he undertakes during his couple of years in New York to be disorienting and that is a consequence of the period of modernity. We're living in a time in the Roaring Twenties for massive economic expansion and new technologies like the expansion of the railways, references to the automobiles, travel, and the use of telegrams and wires and telephones. These are all modern things, markers of a very prosperous United States. But just like Gatsby acquires his wealth through greed and exploitation, and he's associated with the darker underbelly. So Nick, I think, in this passage gives us a perspective that things aren't okay. As a landmark within this dim scene, there is the faded billboard poster of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. His omniscient gaze stares out at this scene, but unlike an omniscient power such as God, who sees everything, T.J. Eckelberg is impassive and apathetic to the lives of the poor, including, on line 6 there, the ash-grey men who swarm up with leaden spades and stir up an impenetrable cloud. The working class characters are not fully characterized within this novel, and gives you a sense of the marginalization of the poor when compared to the lives of the rich. And this is something that Nick claims to find distasteful, but he fails to see their true identity either. In the last paragraph, Dr. T.J. Eckelberg's persistent stare, there's an idea of him looking, scrutinizing with the giant eyes of the oculist's billboard sign, looking at this scene with something approaching anger, yet there is no final reaction from him. In fact, Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, Nick describes sardonically as having built his some wild wag of an oculist, set them there to fatten his practice in the borough of Queens, and then sank down himself into eternal blindness. So capitalist exploitation, he's built his practice, he's taken his money, and he's disappeared, and he no longer cares about his customers. And sinking down into eternal blindness is a reference to death and a lack of care or attention. He forgot them and moved away. Well, Daisy and Tom are careless in their interactions with other people. They are purely selfish themselves. So Nick, as the narrator, yeah, he's very sardonic, and that's typical of in chapter 1. Immediately previous to this, he moves away from Daisy and Tom's house, disgusted by what he sees, and he is disgusted again by the actions of Tom Buchanan. In fact, he accuses Tom of being drunk. In this line, he says, "I think Tom had tanked up a good deal at luncheon," and drags him by the elbow, literally forcing him from the car in gestures that border on violence. And this is typical of Tom's bullish, masculine, alpha male status, where he tells Nick what he will do and who he will interact with. And Nick finds this to be very overwhelming and judges Tom because of it. It's not actually the first time we've met Tom Buchanan's mistress, which is the reason Tom forces Nick off the train. In chapter 1, it was revealed by Jordan Baker that she was phoning the Buchanan household, and so yeah, that now the plot reveals we're about to meet the character in the flesh for the first time. So in conclusion, to talk about the importance of this passage to the text as a whole, I think it gives us a counterpoint towards the opulent lives of the rich. It allows us to see this social depravity through the eyes of Nick, and with extremely descriptive language, where Fitzgerald paints us an atmosphere akin to that of a horror novel. Nick does pass moral judgment upon the lives of these people who are living very immoral, very greedy, selfish, materialistic lives. It also establishes a setting which we will return to again in a novel, this time in the yellow death car as Gatsby plows into Daisy and Gatsby plow into Myrtle Wilson, who, as a female member of the working classes, is unable to escape her her socially deprived situation. And it is also a prelude to Tom completing his the disdain that he has for George B. Wilson, and that's typical of Tom's character, who uses and bullies and cajoles other members of the narrative to do what he wants with complete indifference.